live here. He lives here.
Thank you for helping my family and I get through these very strange times.
Can I just say how much I am enjoying your new show? Really good. You are loved.
I appreciate you, Chris. You're doing a great service to Delaware Valley.
This is Philadelphia's Morning Answer with Chris Stigall on Philadelphia's AM 990. The Answer.
Now, you know how important yesterday's Supreme Court activism is because both Morning Joe and CNN, Allison Camerata, are leading with it at the top of this hour. They are ecstatic about this Supreme Court ruling yesterday. Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania's Attorney General, is on with Allison Camerata right now.
Their ballots in seemingly record numbers. And they also tried to unwind a state Supreme Court decision that said, look, as long as your ballot is postmarked by 8 p.m. on Election Day and received by Friday at 5 p.m., 3 days later, it would be counted. And the Supreme Court of the United States essentially reaffirmed that with their ruling. Look, we should want all votes to count.
So that's the message. That's the message this morning from Pennsylvania Democrats, led by the Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer in the Commonwealth. They are doing an end zone dance, celebrating a Supreme Court ruling about how Pennsylvania counts its votes for a very important reason. We all understand what it is. We all understand that Pennsylvania went for Trump. We all understand 20 electoral votes up for grabs. We all understand that so goes Pennsylvania, so goes this presidency. We all understand it. And so do they. And that's why CNN and MSNBC are covering it with delight this morning. Ordinarily, the Supreme Court ruling on a voter... What if there was an election issue in Oregon before the Supreme Court yesterday, and the Supreme Court ruled on it? Do you think that it would lead the top of the hour news this morning that the Supreme Court sided with Democrats in Oregon?
I don't even know if I'd print that for you in the morning.
Right. No one would talk about it. No one would care because no one's interested in Oregon. But everybody understands what's up for grabs in Pennsylvania, and they know what they're doing. And just what you heard him say, what we just jumped in and joined him live saying. Can you believe the Republicans had the audacity to try to fight the idea that you can fill out a ballot, have it postmarked by 7 p.m. on Election Day, and to be counted by Friday at 8 p.m. after Election Day? Can you believe that that would be a problem for someone? And thankfully, the Supreme Court sided with us. Well, over at Newsmax, Benjamin Manis is back with us. He's written the piece on not so much this, although it dovetails nicely, this court ruling that came out last night from the Supreme Court, or yesterday. Reconciliation of ballot mandates DOJ halt mail-in voting. He doesn't like mail-in voting. He doesn't think it remotely secure. We talked about this yesterday, Democrats running this campaign. You've seen the yard signs. It's weird, actually. Citizenry sticking yard signs in their front yard. It's safe to mail in your ballot. It's safe to vote by mail. This weird propaganda campaign to get people to lovingly embrace mail-in ballots. What's going on out there? Mr. Manis, welcome back to Philadelphia's AM 990 The Answer. Hi.
How are you, Chris? Good morning. Let's jump right into this,
please.
If you don't mind, because we have a lot to unpack. So my article was written, Newsmax, unfortunately, in this case, is national. So there's a lot of national examples. I've been getting, a steady ear beating from people online about, that's not correct. That's not correct here. Well, okay, I have to write what's happening in D.C., Maryland, Delaware, California as well. But let's talk about Pennsylvania. 2016, Trump wins with 44,000 votes. 2016 was a standard election. You had to go to the polling place or request your ballot as an absentee. Now we have mass mail-in ballots. The issue with Pennsylvania is the books. The books are paper that are going out to the polling place. So any of my people listening to your show right now know that when you go to your polling place, that nice old lady who's volunteering at your polling place looks you up in a binder. Your name and signature are there. You sign next to your signature. You go in and you cast your ballot. The problem is, if people are sending, as the Supreme Court ruling just affirmed, their mail-in ballots late, and they don't have time to reconcile them, all the guardrails in place to make sure that vote isn't cast twice are pretty much nullified.
Thank you for bringing this up. I'm sorry to jump in, but we were just talking about this yesterday. If I walk in and physically vote on Election Day, and I mail in my ballot on Election Day, and then they still count it till Friday, how do they know which one? I mean, how do they cross-reference?
So here's how it should work in a perfect world. And I had this confirmed by an attorney for the Philly Republicans last night, who was very kind enough to Matt Wolf's his name. We'll give him a shout out. He was very kind enough to get in touch with me on social media. So if you get a mail-in ballot in Pennsylvania, right? You go through the 900 propaganda methods to request and receive your mail-in ballot. Facebook being the biggest. It has a barcode on it. That barcode goes in by mail. The problem is, now the barcode, once it's scanned in, is supposed to nullify the polling place, i.e., if you go to the polling place, it'll cancel it out because it's already been read for you, the voter. However, they haven't addressed any method for which we could do this close to, syncing up, i.e., not even the same day, within the week, because you're counting in the Postal Service, and you're counting in, the most important part is the human element. Who is actually at the centers where these mail-in ballots are coming in? How well are they staffed? How well are they oversight? Who's checking the signatures? Who's checking the barcodes against the signatures? No one has actually told us this yet, because it's one of these fluid things that you're trying to figure out as the days go on, and it's wrought with the potential for fraud. So can I address the biggest, counterpoint that anyone on the left will give you, which is, hey, there's no evidence that there's actually fraud. First things first, there's tons of evidence. Matter of fact, let's just look at the primary. In Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia alone, 375 votes by mail-in ballot were thrown out. Ozzie Myers, a name that no one's really spoken since Abscam, went and got himself indicted again for election fraud. So, this is a situation that's not only happening, it's happening within the last 6 months. And, Philadelphia is known for its voter fraud. We got great people. Look up the name Joseph Cheeseborough, the 100-year-old person who voted more than twice in the Obama election, right? We found that out. And it seems like every time there is an actual story breaking evidence in court about election fraud, no one wants to talk about it. They always just assert that it's not true.
Yes, and here's another component that has just kind of vanished into the ether after the Trump people put up a noble fight on it, but I never heard a resolution, and I don't know that anything has changed. That's these, what they call election centers, these 15 satellite locations where no one's allowed to supervise any of it, but you can walk in, secure a ballot, vote in person, drop it off, but they don't want to call it a polling place. They want to call it some crap name like election center, and thus they say the Trump people aren't allowed in to supervise it. Don't tell me that's not rife with fraud, that they're stacking. They're packing that right now. That's what they're doing.
Well, and of course they're going to argue that we're speculating. But the point is, and you've made it, the courts have not been a friend to election security because, unfortunately, our courts on a local level, and that was decided at a local level, state and local level, our courts are elected. And there are, of course, more Democrats in the Delaware Valley than there are Republicans. So they threw that out of court. They determined it was not a polling place. Let me give you an example from the second Obama election, right? When Obama went to be reelected, their local polling places in Philadelphia in high school gyms, and one of them literally had an Obama mural on the wall as big as the entire high school gym wall.
I remember
and
that.
They put a polling place in there.
Unbelievable.
So this is what they do when there's actually election supervisors in charge of this thing. Now you're basically, emitted a gigantic propaganda campaign about get out and vote, get out and vote, get out and vote. Motivating people who wouldn't be voting.
Yep.
And that's something for another discussion.
Ben Manis is with us, by the way, for people listening in that have just joined us. Benjamin Manis is a Newsmax contributor. He's got a piece, Reconciliation of Ballot Mandates, DOJ Halt Mail-in Voting. The Supreme Court ruling yesterday, Ben, clearly tells us they just won't. They refuse. Well, John Roberts and the left anyway. One wonders if Amy Coney Barrett had been sitting on the court, how that might have changed the dynamic. But John Roberts siding with the three traditional left-wing members of the court. But I always assumed that GOP would lose this because the Supreme Court has shown their unwillingness to weigh in on the way states do their elections and the way they redistrict and the way they count ballots, right?
It's a tradition. I mean, honestly, it's not a bad tradition because all good traditions have died on the vine in 2020, thanks to this incredibly hyper-partisan environment that we're living in right now. But it's true. States have always governed how they elect. And it's just becoming a situation where the word oversight and the word integrity is being confused with, just the same reason law and order on another subject is being confused with some kind of partisan belief. The truth is this. There's anyone who ignores oversight is someone that should be suspect. And that goes for, look at Philadelphia city government voting to reject their inspector general, the inspector general's oversight for years. Look at the fact that Philadelphia has no constables because it's a city of the first class. There's no independent election security force. They're sending sheriffs who work for Rochelle Bilal out to watch polling places. This should scare people because oversight is not a bad thing. Independent oversight is a good thing. So anyone who wants to block independent oversight is probably trying to get away with something, at least in the common sense way of looking at it.
And you know what I hate? I know for a fact that they are covering this with such lust this morning on CNN and MSNBC because they know what they've gotten away with. They are so thrilled with the Supreme Court ruling yesterday that they're going to butt out and let Pennsylvania keep counting ballots till the Friday after Election Day. They're so excited because they know that gives them the runway that they've been so craving, just on the off chance Trump should win Pennsylvania.
Because they know Pennsylvania is the battleground state that got 2016 won by only 44,000 votes. And let's be really honest. The 44,000 votes came from central and western Pennsylvania.
Yep.
So if they could offset only 44,000 votes in counties that, quite honestly, there really can't be any shenanigans in because, A, they have constables, B, they also have, very limited polling sites because it's rural. So, when you have a polling place at every corner, it's a little easier to get away with stuff than it is, when there's a choke point. But, yeah, I mean, honestly, if they could tip the scales in a place that's, 90, 80% Democrat, yeah, it may be the way they can steal the presidential election.
Here's the only thing I hold out as a possibility. I don't mean to be Pollyanna because I do think this is dire, but the only hope that I cling to is the 200,000 newly registered Republicans since the primaries. Right. That is a pretty hefty number. So I wonder, and that's not coming from the southeastern part of the state. So I wonder what that means.
I mean, think about the reason, and I have, maybe it's because I'm a Slapshot fan, I love Johnstown, but, there have been two events in that, two in Harrisburg, one in Johnstown. That's where these votes are coming from.
Yep.
The old Rust Belt parts that Hillary Clinton ignored in 2016, the places where, people are finally seeing plants come back and steel come back. And they want to get back to work.
So, Ben, do you think that could be potentially enough? I mean, could the volume be such that it couldn't be overcompensated by fraud? Yeah,
I mean, let me speak to this. There's no way of knowing in 2020. But the caveat is, at the end of my article, I talked about a DOJ challenge to mail-in balloting. Keep in mind that was written 2 weeks ago before the Hunter Biden thing. And it's probably too late for any of that at this point. So we, the law-abiding, proper voters of America have to get out and vote. The only way that any of these shenanigans could be countered is if there is an overwhelming response on Election Day, nationwide, one way or the other,
yes,
to cancel out any possible argument. I mean, there are still people walking around who think Al Gore won the election against Bush. You know what I mean? You have to be able to counter that argument by overwhelming force.
Yes.
And how you do that is by getting out there and voting. By the way, the entire argument for mail-in voting as a safety measure is moot. I'm sorry. It's plain old moot. Because you could go to the grocery store. You could go to Home Depot. There is no reason, if you could walk around a supermarket and stand in line with everyone, you can't walk into a high school gym for 3 minutes and go into your booth alone and vote.
Hell, even Fauci said he's going to vote in person on 60 Minutes
Yes.
this week. Yeah.
I mean, this is, by the way, the same argument against voter ID. Oh, voter ID targets poor and elderly people. That's interesting because you need an ID to get an access card, which is a Pennsylvania benefits card for, public assistance. And you need an ID to get your SSI benefits and go into a doctor's office and show them your ID and your insurance card. So what are we talking about? Who are these magic people who are being disenfranchised?
All right, Mr. Manis, the piece at Newsmax, Reconciliation of Ballots, mandates DOJ halt mail-in voting. That's your latest at Newsmax. And where can people find you? You're on Twitter as well. People should know if they want to follow you there.
Yeah, at Public Safety SME on Twitter. Or I'm sure Eddie will link some of this stuff out.
We'll retweet you here when I go to break.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, follow me on Twitter for more stories or catch me on Newsmax. I appreciate it.
Come back and see us, Ben. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.
7:19. Herschel Walker on the way at 8 o'clock. How about that? I really do. Seriously, I have to ask him. I'm dying to ask him. Hey, Herschel, how would you have felt about being on the Eagles 1-4 and in the driver's seat in the division? What would that be? I really want to, like, setting the election aside for a minute, the NFC East, what a dumpster fire. So anyway, that's coming up this morning, and Steve Moore, our chief economist, there is a blockbuster-looking number coming out at the end of the month on GDP, to the extent that people are paying attention to the economy and their 401ks. It's roaring, folks. That's another one of those things. Gallup says 56% of Americans, according to Gallup, think they're better off today than they were 4 years ago. That poll has never incorrectly predicted who was going to win the election, given that number before. Whoever's in charge when they answer in the affirmative. So, again, there's all of this stuff, as Fauci says, anecdotally, that suggests Trump should run away with it. But, boy, are the forces at work to keep that from happening. This is Philadelphia's AM 990 The Answer.